On the first real weekend of spring, my friend and I found this multicolored sculpture. I liked how the colors made the ordinary intersection so much more magical. It was one of those bright, glorious days when it's impossible to stay inside, so we walked downtown. Ottawa is really two different cities, one French and one English, separated by a powerful river, and walking across the bridge between them one can feel the deeply rooted divide between the two. I sometimes think that, given the choice, there wouldn't be any bridges at all. We headed first to a park behind the National Art Gallery, where we saw this sculpture that I thought looked like a strand of hair stretching up to the sky. Then we saw Samuel de Champlain looking through his astrolabe. He's one of those important people that you learn about in Canadian high school history classes, and in this case it is legitimate, because after all he did found Quebec City. Then we walked down to the front of the art gallery, where we saw this giant spider, and also this church. The spider is called Maman because it has eggs in its abdomen, and although it was somewhat controversial when it was installed, I happen to love it. We found this 3D map and kept walking in the direction of Parliament Hill, past the imposing American Embassy, and this old government building, and this grand hotel. And then we were here, at Parliament Hill. This green copper-roofed building is the seat of Canada's government, and I happen to think it's one of the nicest Parliament buildings around. The clock tower is called the Peace Tower, and if you're so inclined you can go up it for a view over the city. But my friend and I weren't, so instead we climbed up behind Parliament, where we saw this cat sanctuary, and this pagoda, and also the Library of Parliament. This bell is left over from a fire in 1916, which destroyed all of Centre Block except this beautiful round library. The view overlooking the river from behind Parliament is just fantastic, and we stood for a while, looking across the river at Quebec, where I live, down towards the Supreme Court, and over at the art gallery where we had been. I love being up high, the feeling of overseeing everything and yet being removed from it, and it's always hard to tear myself away from a good view. But I did, and we went on to see our head of state, Queen Elizabeth, and these women having a tea party. They're the suffragettes who fought for Canadian women's right to vote, and whether because I'm a woman or just because of the design, they're my favorite statue on the hill. We went down to the banks of the Rideau Canal and walked across the locks, and looked down to the bridge we'd crossed earlier. We walked along beside the canal and saw flags and this cool building. And look, it's us! And more flags. And a totem pole. We found this statue of Oscar Peterson that played music, and then the cenotaph, and still more flags. What is it with places and flags? We walked past the fancy hotel and the old train station, and ended up in the park, where we sat and watched people playing frisbee, and talked about the future, difficult though it was to imagine as the perfect afternoon stood still. We felt certain that catching our dreams wouldn't be nearly as easy as catching a frisbee. Eventually we headed down to the Byward Market, where we saw this kindness meter, and had beaver tails, which aren't in fact tails, but are most definitely delicious. And then it was getting late, and we were getting tired, so we returned to the bridge home. As we crossed, I thought about playing tourist in my own city, and the impression it gives. It seems to me that a lot of Ottawa revolves around government, not leaving much room for spontaneity. It's mostly posing, grand buildings and views, and carefully considered statues. Perhaps that's why I like the giant spider so much. It adds a little bit of originality, of life to the town. I don't hate Ottawa. I've lived here too long for that. But in some respects, to me it lacks life.